Hello, my name is Thane and I like to experiment with AI art. Midjourney has a new Nijijourney mode now available for everyone. It is the anime model of Midjourney that mainly has a default style that looks like anime. I am not a huge anime fan myself, but I do appreciate how the style looks. Today I will be testing it out with my usual simple prompts and seeing what the results look like. So how do you enable the Nijijourney mode? You can do that by either adding --Niji to your prompt, or you can go to /settings and highlighting the Niji mode button. For testing and continuity purposes, I have again used the --seed 777 with all the prompts. So let's get started. Abstract. These look very chaotic. Purple tones seem to be dominating here. The abstract has a lot more angles in Niji and it looks more 2D and flat than the default Midjourney. Landscape aspect ratio seems to have some black border issue too going on. My favorite out of the ratios is the portrait aspect ratio. Angel. I do like these a bit more than what the same prompt produces with the default Midjourney. It seems that one of the images seems to be quite recognizable across all the aspect ratios, featuring a quite similar looking character in each ratio. Then there seem to be 4 images across the aspect ratios that are continued on only one additional aspect ratio. And then there is one in the landscape ratio that doesn't have similarities to any other images. I think I like the composition of the portrait aspect ratio the most, so winning point goes to portrait. Animal. So in animals we have a mix of animals and anthropomorphic animals. There doesn't seem to be any images with definite similarities across all aspect ratios, but there is 4 and maybe 6 similar looking styles. The maybe ones being these. And this time I think I like the landscape aspect ratio the most despite the black borders. The animals look so fierce in that ratio. Architecture. It makes sense that all of the architecture has a strong Asian vibe to it, as anime does originate from Asia. There seems to be some black borders this time in the portrait view. 3 of the images continue their theme and looks throughout all the aspect ratios for this prompt. And then there is one style that maybe could also be the same image in a different aspect ratio or just similar, but has its own style. The winning choice is really tough. I guess I do like the portrait ratio because it somehow feels more impressive for the perspective views. Blueprint. For this it's really hard to tell if there is similarities. The robot and mecha blueprints look quite cool. Very sci-fi. Landscape and portrait aspect ratios seem to have some border issues. And square aspect ratio is not perfect either. I guess the portrait ratio looks the best in this case. The borders are kind of disguised and make sense as part of the paper. Cartoon. I included this prompt because it gave me some interesting results in the default Midjourney. For Nijijourney it doesn't give that big of an effect, just creates random anime characters I guess. But some of them look quite fierce in the middle of action and all that. One image seems to have the theme and style continue across all aspect ratios. And there is one definite and one maybe theme that continues across 2 different aspect ratios. The rest are pretty unique. Small black border again in landscape aspect ratio on one image. The winner is again portrait aspect ratio for having the most images. I would like to upscale. Darkness. So many awesome villains coming from this prompt. I really like the glowy eyes and sinister looks. And again we have one image where the look and feel is carried over across all the aspect ratios. Then there are 3 images that look similar to one other aspect ratio. And then the landscape aspect ratio just goes full on bonkers. This one looks like it's straight out of a video game. And this looks like an alien cat creature with very big glowy eyes or a gas mask maybe. Really awesome stuff. Again some issues with black borders in both portrait and landscape ratios, but I don't even care because the images look so cool to me. Winner is landscape. Emblem. And now we go back to a bit boring topic, which is emblems. But these look quite awesome. The default Midjourney style had only birds and wings and similar colors, but this is nice. Such variety in colors, no text anywhere. I guess all of the images could be considered continuations of each other across all the aspect ratios. They look similar enough. I think it's these three, these three, these three and these three. And the winning point goes to portrait ratio again for most detail. The other two ratios look a lot more simple compared to portrait ratio. Fire. This prompt again creates some awesome villains or even heroes with some fire skills. There looks to be one image that looks similar in all aspect ratios, and 3 images that are similar in 2 aspect ratios. Others are quite hard to distinguish, because the color scheme is similar in all the images, being fire. This time my favorite is the square aspect ratio. Flower. These look nice with the flower petals flying around. I do prefer the default Midjourney's flowers as they look epic. These are nice, but not necessarily epic. There seem to be 4 pairs of images that look similar to 1 different aspect ratio. The winner for this prompt is again the portrait ratio. It has nicer overall feel. Heart. Nijijourney does hearts definitely differently than the default Midjourney. While default Midjourney mainly generates human hearts, Nijijourney is going for the heart symbol. The hearts are mainly in similar color tones, there's red, pink and purple colors mostly. And they're not at all similar to each other across the aspect ratios. I would say that these two could be related and maybe these two. But the winner is again portrait. Landscape got close, but the black borders appear again. Infographic. I have included the prompt infographic because I had a feeling it could produce nice images for image prompting. These look quite nice for that purpose and depending on the prompt could generate something like this. For similarities I'm looking for mostly similar colors and shapes. There seems to be one image that is similar across all different aspect ratios. And 2 images that have a similar image in 1 different aspect ratio. The rest don't really look alike. I think my favorite out of these is the square aspect ratio. Portrait and landscape do seem to have some issues with borders. Landscape. So for landscape we have some landscapes mixed in with cityscapes. There seem to be 2 images that have similarities across 3 different aspect ratios. I especially like the violet ones with the house and a Mount Fuji looking mountain in the background. But I may be biased a little bit, because purple is my favorite color. There is also one image with some similarities at least with the color scheme across 2 aspect ratios. And the rest are pretty unique ones. My winner out of these is the square aspect ratio. Logo. These logos look quite abstract, but still nice. Mostly no text on them except the square aspect ratio that has some Asian-looking text on 2 of the images. It is very difficult to spot similarities, but I think that these 3 images look somewhat similar. And these 2. The rest I don't really think so. They're not as exciting looking though, but okay. The winning point goes to landscape for no text, some more color and the purple one. Map. I wouldn't call most of these maps. There's only 2 images here that slightly look like maps. Other images are just views of a city. And there may be 1 set of images across different aspect ratios. These 2 images look quite similar as well. With the rest it's so hard to tell. The point winner this time is square aspect ratio, because it doesn't have big black or some other colored borders. There is 1 map-looking image and 2 isometric views of cities. Planet. Now these look a lot more like I would imagine an image of a planet should look like. From this selection I think these 3 look quite similar. And possibly also these three. And these two. And also these two. With the other ones it's kind of hard to tell. But the images look like they're out of some space video games. They may even look nicer than some games I've tried myself. There seem to be some borders in the portrait and landscape aspect ratios. And the overall nicest images are in the square aspect ratio. I like the colors and compositions of them the most. Robot. These robots look quite nice. The default Midjourney generates some cute little household robots with this prompt, but Nijijourney goes more for battle robots or mecha suits. There seems to be two images that repeat over all the aspect ratios and one image that has similarities with only one other aspect ratio. Out of these I might even like the landscape ratio the most. There's some nice action going on and I really like the top right robot despite the black border. Schematic. Oddly enough, the robot theme seems to be continuing with the schematic prompt as well. Right now it looks to me that there is only two definitely similar images in the aspect ratios. And these are a maybe. From the other ones it is really hard to tell as overall the images look quite similar, yet not so much as they depict completely different things. But overall these look completely different from the Midjourney default counterpart. The landscape ratio has some black borders again, with clipping occurring as well. Portrait is slightly better, but there's quite a lot of clipping too. So the win goes to square aspect ratio, which doesn't have those problems. Skull. For skulls we get pretty nice results. They're colorful. Maybe a bit less detailed than I would prefer, depending on the ratio it seems. And here it distinctly looks like there's three sets of images represented across all aspect ratios. And also one set that can be seen across two aspect ratios. And this one is just its own thing. My favorite out of these is the portrait aspect ratio. It has the most detail and it looks the coolest. I really like the villain guy with the skull mask on. Sphere. These look all really shiny and sparkly. Definitely don't look anything like the default Midjourney. And it does seem that the planets and spheres in Nijijourney don't look alike at all. So definite similarities in these images across all aspect ratios. And these two may be related. And a far-fetched likeness could even be seen in these three as well, although there's an anime character suddenly appearing inside the sphere in portrait aspect ratio. The winning point again goes to portrait aspect ratio for most epic-looking images. Statue. It seems that this prompt tends to generate anime figurines that look pretty photorealistic in most of the images. There are some exceptions as well. It doesn't really seem like there is any images that look similar throughout the different aspect ratios. These come close, but I don't think the portrait image fits in the bunch. Other similar images are these, and these. Landscape aspect ratio seems to be doing completely its own thing, looking very different from other aspect ratios. And my favorite is portrait aspect ratio, because the statues or figurines are nicely in frame with full body and there's so much more detail compared to the square ratio. Tree. This prompt has so much more color than the default Midjourney counterpart of this prompt. These trees look very beautiful, although there is some issues with the tree canopies being fully in the frame with all aspect ratios. There seem to be two sets of similar images across all aspect ratios. And these two look similar to me as well. I love the purple and pink colors. And there's even some green leaves in some images. My favorite out of these is the portrait aspect ratio. The images look so epic somehow. Waterfall. Quite magical looking waterfalls. The color scheme on these images looks mostly blue and green. I would say that there's two sets of three images that have variations across all aspect ratios. These two look also quite similar to each other. The same could be said for these two. My favorite is again the portrait aspect ratio, because it has more detail and somehow the waterfalls look taller in this ratio. Woman. Very similar looking images in comparison to the prompt cartoon. I thought these looked familiar for some reason. These 4 images look basically the same with both prompts. There seems to be one image that has variations across different aspect ratios. These 2 images also look quite similar. But the rest of the images look distinctively different from each other. Favorite points go again to portrait aspect ratio. Results. So there were some interesting results that came up when prompting the same things in Nijijourney as I have prompted in the default Midjourney. The biggest takeaway for me is that the colors are heavily skewed towards purple, pink and sometimes blue. I was especially surprised by the cartoon and woman prompts generating basically the same images with slight differences. But in the aspect ratio comparison, portrait ratio wins with overwhelming points. The second best was the square ratio and my least favorite was the landscape ratio. I guess this means that when generating images with Nijijourney, I will mostly be using the portrait aspect ratio as it did seem to generate images with nice compositions and a lot more detail in comparison to other aspect ratios. So I do hope you found this experiment useful and you get an idea of what kind of images you can create with Nijijourney. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you like this kind of content. Have a nice day and let's continue prompting.